Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day so far. So today we're back with another foundation review, and this time it's the Givenchy Prisme Libre Skin Caring Glow Foundation. So I picked this one up because previously I haven't ever tried Givenchy foundations. The launch that they released the last time around, their last foundation they released, had an abysmal shade range with only pink or yellow undertones and only a handful of very limited shades. There was like 10 that were all the same, then there was another 8 that looked all the same, and then there was 2 tan shades on the end. So it just really didn't warrant me reviewing it, in my opinion, that shade range. And so when I saw the shade range for this new foundation that had 10, I think at least maybe 10 more shades, a decent number, 30, getting towards what we want to see, and more undertones, neutrals, as well as pinks and yellows in those undertones, as well as a huge increase in the number of deep tanned dark shades. So I was far more interested in this foundation all around for those reasons. Way better inclusivity from Givenchy, and really nice to see that growth and improvement from a brand. So everything you need to know about this foundation will be on the screen. There's no huge outlandish wear claims for this foundation. It appears to be a light medium dewy foundation that is supposed to be hydrating. So yeah, without further ado, let's get it on my face and see how we feel about it. I feel like it's got a very barely noticeable fragrance. It will be interesting to see how much I notice it while I'm applying it. Going in on this side first with my damp beauty blender that is clean, but doesn't look very clean because it's a little stained. So it's very thin. Okay, so it's much more noticeable once you start applying it. That's the first thing. So yeah, a noticeable fragrance, kind of along the lines of like the Clé de Peau foundation. Trying to think of another foundation that would be a similar, the Chanel. It's a definitely noticeable fragrance. That is for sure. So fragrance sensitive peeps may want to give this little guy a skip. So it's feeling very cooling, very hydrating. I'm pretty happy with this shade match, I will say that. It's definitely a little on the warm side for a neutral shade, but it's definitely workable for me. At this point, it's giving me like a light coverage, I'd say, with the sponge. I think with these really runny, thin, dewy, kind of hydrating type of foundations, we're probably going to get much more coverage easier with a brush, because the sponge is just going to soak all of that liquid up. It's also doing that thing that these type of foundations tend to do, where at first it's almost like it's sitting on top of the skin. It's not really melting into the skin. That kind of happens as they dry down, I find. So yeah, you're going to use a lot of this foundation. I'm just going to try and do another layer to see if I can even out my skin tone a bit, get rid of some of this redness that's still showing through. Let's see if we can achieve that. So it's definitely building very, very easily and very nicely. It's not like it's picking foundation back up, which some foundations, especially dewy ones, do. As you try and build, they just kind of pick up what you're building on top of, but this isn't happening. It's really building very nicely, and now we achieved a medium like really quickly, and the majority, if not all of my redness is now pretty evened out on this side, but I'd still say we're on a medium coverage. I'm thinking this is going to be a foundation where if you want the full, you're going to need to get a brush involved. So we've used about half of what was on my palette, and now I'm going to use my Rephr 17, and we're going to go on the other side and we'll see. I mean, you can probably instantly see with a brush you get coverage quicker with less product. It does feel super hydrating and cooling going on, very refreshing, and it still feels that way on this side. And I definitely feel that with dewy foundations, a lot of the time as you're applying them, they don't look their best because they do sort of sit on top of the skin and they need to melt and dry down before you start to see the plumping effect, if they have hyaluronic acid, or if they are smoothing, it kind of needs to work its way into the skin, as opposed to like a matte foundation that as you're putting it on, you're seeing like the finished article. I'm definitely getting like a fair amount of brush strokes that I'm having to like work in. So I think this is going to be one of those foundations where to get the coverage, you may want to use a brush, but then to get a flawless finish, you might want to go over with a sponge. So that was kind of the one layer, and we're at a pretty sort of like for like amount of coverage. So yeah, I think it's going to be one where you use your brush for your coverage and then even everything out with a sponge. So everything on here is pretty much done. I'm going to do another pump and just use the sponge all over. The brush strokes have all pretty much worked their way in now, but yeah, it's definitely taking a little bit more elbow grease than like some foundations, just to get everything even and looking how I want it to. And it's definitely taken like quite a bit of foundation to get it up to like a medium coverage and like for everything to be even. Okay, so I just went back in and checked on Harrods' website, and it does say light to medium coverage, so it's exactly what it says. I don't know why I thought it said full coverage, but yeah, definitely light to medium, totally agree. I got a light coverage with that first layer, and we're now looking at a medium. And now, as I thought that everything's on, I've kind of built it up to even out my skin tone. It's looking very beautiful. That really healthy, luminous glow. It's looking really smooth for such a glowy foundation. There's a lot of glow going on here, and I'm super happy with the shade as well. I really wasn't like sure what to expect from the shade. It is a little warm, given that it's, you know, a neutral shade, but once the concealer and everything is on, you can see against my body, obviously my face is much lighter, my neck is a little lighter, but against my body, this is going to be a good match, I think. But yeah, so far it's slightly settling into my smile lines, which I really don't think many dewy foundations are really gonna cope with things like smile lines the best of foundations. But my forehead looks good as far as lines. It looks nice and smooth, and yeah, the overall glow and the overall smoothness and evenness is exactly what I look for in a foundation. Like, I still want to see my skin, I still want to look like a human, I still want to, you know, just have some kind of luminosity and natural look to the skin. So let's finish off my makeup and give this like a couple of hours to see if we get any kind of oxidization or anything like that happening, and how everything goes on the top of my foundation, and we'll be back in a moment. Okay, so I am back. I've finished the rest of my makeup. I did my hair, and I've been pottering around a little bit, doing a little bit of home schooling in between when I left you last. So this foundation has definitely had a chance. What is that? So this foundation has definitely had a chance to sort of, you know, become its finished product, and we're really seeing what the finish is and all of that. I have not set with powder, as I never set my whole face with powder. I want to see what the finish of this foundation looks like throughout the day and see how it wears without the need to set it, as it's not something I usually do with my makeup. I have only set my under eye area, my chin and my nose where I put concealer, all those places. But yeah, it's still feeling the hair bit tacky to the touch, the tiniest little bit. So I don't think this is going to be a foundation that is going to be transfer proof. Generally, dewy foundations, especially if you don't set them with a powder, aren't going to be fully transfer proof because it's just the nature of the foundation. But it's just a hair bit tacky. It's not something that's going to be super slipping and sliding and moving around on normal or dry skin, at least. It's looking super glowy and beautiful still. It hasn't really settled into my smile lines, no more so than that initial bit that I noticed during the application, which is really, really super good. My forehead hasn't really changed at all. All of my powder products went on top easily and beautifully with nothing moving, no picking up of the foundation. So it certainly sets down enough to put products on top of without too much concern and without having to set it down to get a nice application on the top. So here is a super low light close-up look of what this foundation is doing. Forehead's looking pretty good. As I said, really not sort of creasing or settling super badly in smile lines or anything like that. Very nice and glowy and dewy and super smooth as well. This kind of problem area that many of us have with signs of aging, you know, the start of lines, wrinkles, creasing, that looks really good. I'm super happy with that. So yeah, as a starting point, you know, and a couple of hours in, I'm super happy with how everything is looking so far. Okay, so this foundation has been on for a few hours now. I've had my lunch, I've been doing some homeschooling, and I've filmed another video and been doing some editing. So it's just given it enough time to kind of settle in, you know, if any kind of oxidization might have started to happen, see how it's dried down. I'd say it's still got a slight tackiness to it. So it's not going to be super transfer proof if you're, you know, you've got children rubbing on your face or anything like that, you're whipping clothes off on and off over the top of your face, it is going to come off on them. I don't think it's going to be the worst. It's not slipping and sliding around, but yeah, it does have a slight tack to it, as most dewy foundations do if you don't set them down. So so far, I'm loving the finish. I think it's a beautiful, dewy, natural luminosity. I wish that either it had like a hair, like a solid medium coverage, or that it did kind of neutralize my redness a little bit more. It's still kind of peeking through. My melasma is still kind of peeking through. So for me personally, my preference, I'd like just a hair bit more coverage, but nothing bad is happening. All of my products went on top of it beautifully. It looks super beautiful, natural, smooth, fresh, and it still feels really hydrating. Like I physically feel my face feels hydrated right now. It really does. I also was going to say I just stepped out into some natural daylight, but it is hoofing down with rain here, so I just stepped up to the window instead of going out the door to give you some natural daylight, to have a look at this foundation, how it appears in natural daylight. Again, I think it's really skin-like, natural, beautiful finish and super smoothing, and I'm really enjoying it so far. So yeah, so far so good. As I said at the beginning, there's no outlandish wear claim. It doesn't claim to be 24-hour wearing or anything like that. So we're going to see, we're going to give it another 5 hours, maybe 5 or 6 hours, and come back and see how it's worn. See you in a few. Okay guys, so it is just gone 6 p.m. here in the UK. I'm freezing. I had a hoodie on that I took off for prosperity purposes, and now I'm like shivering. Okay, so just to be clear, this has not been like a hard day's wear for this foundation. Don't get me wrong. Obviously we're in full lockdown here. We can't go anywhere, and I've been homeschooling my kids, doing some editing, filming some other videos. That's like about it. So it's the equivalent of like an office day. It's not going to be the equivalent of if you're a working nurse or a doctor, or it's not going to be, you know, like you've worn a mask all day. It's freezing cold here, but we have had the heating on, but it's not been hot or humid. So it's not been a very testing day. The foundation, let's zoom in and look at the teeth. Now, it hasn't worn disastrously. That's not what I'm here to say, but the forehead definitely has got shinier throughout the day, and it's got to the point where it's too shiny. So this is going to be one, like for me, even with my normal skin and slightly oily T-zone, I would need to set this to get, like, we're about the 8-hour mark now. And yeah, things are starting to go south, let's say that. So it's not going to be a long wearing foundation. It's got pretty shiny on my forehead, and it's also, I don't know that you'll be able to see this on camera, but it's kind of started to cake up a little. It's reached its peak. My chin is definitely looking like it's worn away a little here. It's worn away at the edges of my mouth where I've been eating. It's worn away here on my nose. I've had a bit of a runny nose today, so I've kind of been dabbing. It's kind of gone from the bottom of my nose there. It's kind of looking a little cakey around here. You can see where it's kind of settled into this little line under my nose on my top lip. So yeah, there's definitely some fading as well. So it's not worn the greatest, is the summary. Now, that's certainly not to say that I don't like this foundation, or I think it's rubbish, or it's useless, or forget about it. I think if you have drier skin, then it may not sort of break down quite as much on you, as your natural oils won't be as much as mine, as I'm more normal, leaning towards the oilier category. So it may wear better if you are drier, and I'll say that. It will wear worse if you are oily, or if you live in a more challenging climate, have a more challenging day, etc. So it's definitely not a good wearing foundation or a long wearing hardy foundation. As for like the middle of the day, when I first applied this, when I first was like looking in the mirror and the first few hours throughout the day, when I showed you the natural daylight footage, I think it looked lovely. It really did look beautiful, very natural, very glowy and dewy. I really liked how it looked, and it has felt light and hydrating throughout the day. So there's definitely some pros and some cons here. I guess the end point, my end conclusion is that I think for the money, you could do better. That's what I'm saying. So I did take a quick flash photo and I think it looks great. I don't think there's bounce back. I don't think there's anything to worry about. Obviously there's no SPF in here, so you wouldn't necessarily expect bounce back, but stranger things have happened. But yeah, no issues with the flash photo. I think it looks great in the flash. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on this foundation. I'd love to know if you guys have tried it, what your thoughts are and how you got on with it. For me, I guess it's like a 5 or a 6 out of 10. I think if you're looking for this kind of foundation with a medium coverage, maybe medium to full, that's dewy, that's luminous, that's skin-like, that's healthy looking, that will wear, you know, for a good solid 8 hours, I definitely would recommend the Tom Ford Shade and Illuminate. If that is way too pricey for your preference, then maybe something like the new Shiseido, that certainly wore better than this one did. The Chanel Beige Hydrating Foundation, that wore slightly better, and I like the finish and all of that just as much. The new Gucci, not quite as glowy, but performed way better as far as wear, and I do prefer that, and that does give that hair more coverage. I don't think it's quite as dewy as this, but at the same time you don't end up with this at the end of the day. So there's definitely, like I said, you can do better. That's what I'm saying to you in conclusion. So I hope you enjoyed this video and you found this review helpful, and I'd love to see you in the next one. Otherwise, take care for now. Bye 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 bye.